Imagine a single moment that could topple a financial giant. One man, underestimated and overlooked, holds the key to a revolution. This is the story of Michael Reed, a tale of dignity, defiance, and a truth so powerful it reshapes an empire. Stay with us to witness justice in action. Do you believe you understand the workings of power? Reconsider that notion. What if an individual, casually disregarded by society, possessed a secret capable of dismantling a vast financial empire? In a single day, Michael Reed transformed quiet shame into a subtle uprising. This narrative isn't solely about wealth. It's about honor, perseverance, and a confrontation that will prompt you to question all you thought you understood about fairness.
Dear audience, what you're about to see transcends a mere tale. It's a compelling tribute to the understated strength and quest for justice in overlooked corners. If this is your first visit, I cordially encourage you to note your location in the comments below. If stories like this stir you, provoke thought, or inspire, please consider subscribing and activating the notification bell. We amplify voices that need to be heard daily. Thank you for joining us. Now, let's dive into the narrative. The imposing glass exterior of Lancaster Bancorp's premier branch shimmered in the morning light, its flawless design a stark symbol of superficial inclusivity. Within, the aroma of fine leather and sterile air drifted through the marble foyer, where murmurs reverberated off lofty ceilings, like secrets too perilous to voice. The structure pulsed with an implicit pecking order. Every action was orchestrated. Executives slipping through glass dividers, receptionists perfecting their flawless grins, security personnel poised with a stillness that murmured, "You're out of place." Into this deliberate calm strode a man, not with the dazzle of riches or a protective retinue, but with a quiet determination that drew eyes precisely because he sought none. His name was Michael Reed, a name destined to echo through corporate suites and shadowy corners alike, though today it went unnoticed. He donned a neatly tailored navy suit, simple yet sharp, with a tie slightly loosened to suggest ease, not negligence. His stride was steady, his stance resolute, his gaze sweeping the room with the composure of one accustomed to entering unwelcoming spaces and leaving them altered. As Michael traversed the foyer, he sensed glances darting his way. The swift appraisal from the concierge, the fleeting look from a passing staff member, the barely noticeable clench of a guard's jaw. His complexion clashed with the marble's sheen, his presence too poised to be dismissed. He carried no attaché case, just a slender folder under his arm, its contents unremarkable to the untrained, yet explosive in their potential. Each step was intentional, yet unhurried, as though he were not stepping into a snare, but laying one. He neared the central reception desk, where a young woman named Claire, her badge gleaming, offered a smile that was refined, yet hollow. "May I assist you, sir?" she inquired, her voice a delicate mix of courtesy and preemptive rejection. Before he could respond, a stocky man in a gray suit, Security Chief Colin Baird, approached from the side. His hand rested on his hip, not touching a weapon, but signaling authority. "Pardon me, sir," Baird said evenly, positioning himself between Michael and the desk. "Could you state your purpose here today?" Michael's lips curved in a subtle smile, one that didn't reach his eyes. "I'm here for a meeting with Mr. Stanton," he replied. Baird's face flickered, brief recognition, then doubt. "There must be some error. Do you have a confirmation of your appointment?" Michael pulled out his phone, deliberately scrolling to the email, and presented it. The screen showed a clear meeting with Jonathan Stanton, head of institutional client services, set for 9 a.m. today. Claire glanced at the display, her smile wavering. Baird stood firm. His tone grew slightly firmer. "Mr. Stanton's calendar is quite packed. Let me verify with his office. Meanwhile, please wait over there." He pointed to a small seating area by the public ATMs, a calculated spot meant to isolate. Michael's gaze held steady. He pocketed his phone, gave a slight nod, and moved aside, but not to the indicated spot. Instead, he stationed himself by the glass partition separating the foyer from the executive elevators. His reflection stared back, a man in command, unseen by those who thought they owned the story. Time ticked by. Claire murmured into a headset, her tone hushed and pressing. Baird lingered nearby, his posture relaxed, but eyes keen. Michael stood motionless, a silent guardian in a space crafted to overlook him. Beyond the glass, executives passed, some casting glances, their faces tightening as they noted the lone figure standing apart. The atmosphere grew heavy with unvoiced strain. Michael's phone vibrated softly with an incoming call. He checked the screen, then answered. His voice was soft, yet clear. "Yes, I'm here." "No, they haven't summoned me yet. Yes, I'll wait." The call ended. The signal was sent. A murmur spread through the foyer as Baird returned, now with another guard. His voice was louder, commanding. "Mr. Reed, I must ask you to exit the premises." The words hung like a falling guillotine. Michael's smile vanished. His voice, when he spoke, was calm, deliberate, yet heavy with impact that echoed off the marble and glass. "You're mistaken. I'm a client with a confirmed appointment." Baird's face reddened, but his reply was swift, sharp. "I'm instructing you to leave now." The silence grew oppressive. Eyes turned, whispers stirred. Michael's heart pounded, but his expression remained serene. He took a breath, and for a moment, time seemed to halt. Then, without objection, he gathered his folder, squared his shoulders, and turned toward the exit. He didn't hasten. His steps echoed deliberately on the marble, carrying the weight of dignity challenged, yet unbroken. Outside, the city hummed, unaware, but within, something intangible fractured. Observers would later claim they didn't know, couldn't have known, what his exit meant, that it was merely a misunderstanding. Another person turned away, but as the sun sank below the skyline that evening, Michael Reed's name would no longer be murmured in secret. It would thunder through news reports, corporate offices, and regulatory halls, shaking the pillars of unchallenged authority. It all started with a quiet arrival, a silent defiance, and a dignity that refused erasure. The buzz of voices, the clack of polished shoes on marble, the soft shuffle of papers, all faded into a sharp, piercing silence as Michael Reed stood still, his pulse beating steadily. The guards flanking him moved with the precision of men accustomed to this routine, but their practiced demeanor couldn't mask the ugliness unfolding. Baird, the stocky security chief, placed a hand on Michael's arm, not hard enough to bruise, but firm enough to send a message. "Sir, I'm asking you one final time. This way," Baird said, his voice loud enough to draw attention. There was no mistaking it now. Michael, who arrived not as a beggar, but as an invited guest, was being ushered out like a trespasser. His scheduled meeting with Jonathan Stanton, which could have sealed a crucial partnership, was reduced to a humiliating spectacle for those who saw him as an anomaly. As Baird and his colleague escorted him toward the exit, the staff's quiet scrutiny turned to hushed gossip. A junior banker whispered to a colleague, "What's he done?" A concierge, eyeing the commotion, muttered, "That's why we have rules." The air, once thick with the clean scent of wealth, now reeked of exclusion cloaked as protocol. Michael's mind traced the surreal cadence of it all, the looks, the rejections, the silent judgments behind each action. His pulse quickened, but his face stayed calm. Every instinct urged him to protest, to demand answers, to confront the indignity. But he knew, from the moment Baird's tone shifted, from the moment his presence became an oddity rather than an appointment. At the glass doors, the world outside sparkled, the city's pulse blind to the silent collapse of dignity within. Baird gave a final push, not harsh, but conclusive, and the door clicked shut behind Michael. His shoulders stiffened, his jaw clenching against a surge of anger and powerlessness. The outside air was crisp, stinging his skin, a stark contrast to the artificial calm he'd left behind. For a moment, Michael stood still, the weight of the moment bearing down. His phone buzzed softly in his pocket. He ignored it, his fists tightening at his sides. He felt every slight, every dismissal, every subtle aggression he'd endured, condensed into this single act of exclusion. Yet, beneath the threat of humiliation, a deeper resolve stirred within his calm facade. He understood the price of anger. He knew the danger of reacting in a system primed to misread his dignity as rebellion. So he inhaled deeply, his lungs filling with sharp air that burned like truth, and exhaled slowly, easing the tension in his chest. This was not the story's end. This was not the conclusion the bank thought it had scripted. Inside, the foyer returned to its polished calm. Baird adjusted his coat, flashed a smirk at a colleague, and shrugged as if dismissing a minor annoyance. Claire resumed her post, her smile snapping back as she greeted the next client, a woman in designer heels, her tone light and effortless. The building resumed its rhythm, as if the breach of dignity moments before was a fleeting ripple, but the ripples were spreading. Michael's exit hadn't gone unnoticed by all. A junior compliance officer, watching from behind a glass partition, logged a quiet note in his digital record. A janitor, who had witnessed the entire scene, stared at the floor for a long moment before resuming his tasks with a bitterness that lingered like dust. Beyond the foyer, a network of allies Michael had cultivated over years was already stirring quietly. He stepped away from the glass exterior, his movements measured and composed. A black sedan idling at the curb rolled forward at his signal. The driver, a reserved man with practiced discretion, opened the door. Michael slid into the seat silently, the door closing with a soft, firm click. As the car merged into the city's flow, he permitted himself a final glance at the building, a towering symbol of wealth and arrogance, now oblivious to the storm it had unleashed. In the sedan's quiet hum, Michael's phone buzzed again. This time he answered, his voice low, controlled. "It's finished," he said. "They've made their choice." A pause, then. "Ready the documents. Complete withdrawal. No delays." The voice on the other end responded with crisp agreement. As Michael hung up, a quiet sense of purpose settled over him. He gazed out the window at the city streaming past, its streets alive with the ordinary rhythm of lives untouched by the morning's silent drama. In his mind, Michael was already mapping the next moves, calls to place, documents to finalize, meetings to cancel. The public insult, the deliberate exclusion. His response would be calculated, precise, and devastating in its impact. The $3.6 billion his firm controlled wasn't mere money. It was power. And, as the bank he'd just left would soon discover, power wielded by a man dismissed was a force stronger than any corporate edict. Michael Reed, stripped of dignity, yet unbroken, was poised to turn the system of exclusion against itself, not with fanfare or drama, but with the quiet, relentless precision of a long overdue reckoning. The sun began its slow descent beyond New York's skyline, bathing the high-rises in shades of burnt gold and deep amber. Inside the serene, climate-controlled conference room of Reed Financial's headquarters, nestled discreetly in a downtown skyscraper, marked only by a subtle brass plaque, Michael Reed sat surrounded by his trusted team. The morning's quiet shame at Lancaster Bancorp lingered like a bitter aftertaste. But it wasn't a defeat that crushed a man. Instead, it fueled a response carefully honed over years. The conference room's walls, free of extravagance, displayed sleek monitors flickering with charts, contract details, and withdrawal protocols. Michael sat at the table's head, his usual understated charcoal suit now a symbol of the quiet authority he always carried. His legal advisor, Clara Mendez, and compliance director, Evan Singh, leaned forward, their faces serious, yet determined. "It's not just about the money," Michael said, his voice soft, each word carefully chosen. "It's about the signal, about showing the world that silence doesn't equal agreement. That exclusion carries consequences." Evan tapped his tablet, pulling up a real-time summary of automated withdrawal orders rippling through Lancaster Bancorp's systems. The $3.6 billion is being transferred to secure, verified accounts. Offshore backups are in place. Media leaks are managed. Within an hour, their liquidity will falter. Clara traced the edge of her coffee mug. "Their compliance team won't anticipate this. We've adhered to every rule, every term. They misjudged you, thinking humiliation would silence you." Michael's gaze remained steady. "They miscalculated," he said. He leaned back, exhaling slowly, deliberately. His mind replayed the morning's events, the bank's gleaming foyer, the thin veil of politeness dissolving into blatant contempt, the orchestrated removal. Now, those same players, smirking executives, complicit staff, would scramble to grasp a financial storm they couldn't control. "Connect me with Baxter Media," he said, his tone allowing no delay. Within moments, the call was patched through to the head of a discreet media group long tied to Reed Financial's network. A woman's voice, sharp and precise, came through the speaker. "Mr. Reed," she said, "I see the withdrawal orders. Should we launch the public statement?" Michael paused, then nodded, though she couldn't see. "Yes." Controlled release to major outlets. No exaggerations, just facts. Ensure Lancaster Bancorp's actions today are recorded. Every slight, every systemic rejection. It's time the truth shapes the story. As the call ended, Michael's team moved quickly, distributing prepared statements, verified evidence, and timelines to pre-briefed reporters. The story would hit the news, not as a sensational expose, but as a measured, factual unraveling of an institution's facade. Any spin Lancaster Bancorp might attempt would be too late. The public narrative was already set. Outside the conference room's windows, dusk settled over the city. Inside, the air buzzed with purpose. Michael's team knew this wasn't just business. It was about restoring dignity, redefining expectations, showing that power came not from loud proclamations, but from steadfast resilience, backed by undeniable evidence. Evan looked up from his screen. "Lancaster's emergency board meeting is set for 8 p.m. They'll try to contain this, but they're out of time. We've initiated audits across their major accounts," Clara added, her voice firm. "The Department of Financial Equity has been notified of the compliance violations. Regulators will be at their door before they can draft a memo." Michael's expression remained calm, but beneath it, a quiet fire burned. He'd always known that being underestimated was a weapon. They'd focused on his appearance, his reserved demeanor, his silence under insult. They never saw the intricate web of influence, preparation, and authority he commanded. This wasn't vengeance, it was accountability, executed with the precision of a man who'd spent decades forging alliances, securing leverage, and positioning himself beyond the reach of public slights. Across town, in Lancaster's towering headquarters, the first alerts began flooding their systems. Transaction freezes, locked high-value accounts, cascading liquidity losses. Executives, initially confused, began to grasp the crisis's scale. Phones rang unanswered, urgent meetings were called, and once confident faces paled with realization. Reed Financial's name, once dismissed as minor, now flashed across screens tied to every critical account, now frozen. Jonathan Stanton, Lancaster's CEO, stormed into the crisis suite, demanding explanations. His team fumbled, citing regulatory triggers, external withdrawal demands, and looming media reports. But it was too late. The damage was done. Michael, seated calmly in his conference room, knew they'd scramble, some to save face, others to deflect blame. But none of it mattered. The facts were fixed, the impact irreversible. He felt no need to revel in their fall. His fulfillment came not from their collapse, but from the quiet assertion of dignity, undeniable, unspinnable, unshakable. Clara's voice broke through the updates. They're already calling it Lancaster's midnight crisis. Michael allowed a faint smile, not of victory, but of quiet determination. Let them name it what they want, he said. By dawn, they'll see it wasn't a crisis. It was a reckoning. As the city lights twinkled against the darkening sky, the quiet strength hidden behind Michael's reserve and unassuming presence stood fully revealed. It wasn't loud or theatrical, but it was irrefutable. By the time dawn broke over New York's spired skyline, Lancaster Bancorp was no longer the unassailable giant it once seemed. The polished glass and marble, once a symbol of unshakable power, now reflected a tale of desperation, of crumbling facades propped up with hollow assurances. In the top-floor boardroom, the air was thick with panic and disbelief. Papers cluttered the long table, where executives sat slumped, their tailored suits wrinkled, their ties loosened, their voices hoarse from hours of damage control. Michael Reed's withdrawal was the first domino, but his meticulous follow-through had brought the entire structure crashing down. As regulators arrived just before sunrise, a hushed stillness settled over the normally bustling headquarters. The news had outpaced the executives' efforts to hide it. Lancaster Bancorp's multi-billion-dollar accounts with Reed Financial, taken for granted, were gone. Internal compliance failures were exposed, discriminatory practices laid bare by Michael's team, and the media, armed with detailed documentation, had claimed the narrative. At home, Michael sat at his kitchen table, sipping black coffee, while scanning headlines on his tablet. Lancaster Bank faces unprecedented crisis amid discrimination claims, one read. Another stated, Reed Financial withdraws $3.6 billion, triggers market chaos. He scrolled slowly, taking in the analyses, the critiques, the condemnations. He felt no triumph, no smugness, just a deep sense of rightness, that justice had spoken through steady, unassailable truth. At Lancaster's headquarters, CEO Jonathan Stanton paced erratically, his face pale under harsh fluorescent lights. His phone buzzed relentlessly, each call delivering worse news. Clients withdrawing accounts, investors halting transactions, compliance officers resigning under looming inquiries. His grip was slipping, and he knew it. His once unassailable reputation was now a faint echo of disgrace reverberating through the halls. Advisors whispered behind closed doors, their trust in him fading with each new alert flashing across their screens. In the near-empty cafeteria, a junior compliance officer named Riley Carter sat clutching her phone, reading the headlines Michael had seen earlier. She'd overheard murmurs about the black client incident the previous day. Only now, with the news dominating every screen, did she grasp the weight of what had happened. Her heart ached, not just for the institution collapsing around her, but for her own silence, her complicity in a culture of subtle prejudice that made her part of the story. She wondered if Michael had noticed her hesitation, her fleeting doubt, and counted her among the culpable. On the trading floor, the few remaining brokers were glued to their screens, watching Lancaster's stock plummet minute by minute. The market had reacted swiftly, punishing the bank not just for financial instability, but for its moral failure. A broker, Owen Daniels, turned to a colleague and muttered, "It's not just the money. It's the culture. This was inevitable." His words met a nod, an acknowledgement of a truth long ignored, now glaringly obvious. Amid the collapse, Stanton called a last-ditch video conference with major stakeholders. The mood on the screen was grim. Faces appeared, some angry, others calculating. Questions flew. Why weren't we warned sooner? How did this happen? What's the recovery plan? Stanton's responses, once polished, now faltered. His assurances sounded empty, his explanations flimsy. One by one, stakeholders muted their screens or left the call, their silence deafening. Meanwhile, Michael's office at Reed Financial was tranquil. Clara Mendez oversaw analysts smoothly transferring assets from Lancaster to ethical financial institutions. Evan Singh coordinated with legal teams to finalize compliance reports for regulators. This wasn't just about dismantling Lancaster. It was about setting a standard, signaling that the era of unchecked discrimination masked as corporate prestige was over. As the sun rose higher, illuminating the wreckage of Lancaster's reputation, Michael stood by his office window, watching the city awaken. He thought of the faces at the bank, the guard who pushed him, the receptionist who dismissed him, the executives who smirked as they orchestrated his exit. None had imagined his quiet authority, his intricate network, could topple their empire. They mistook his composure for submission, his silence for weakness. Now, as their carefully built facade crumbled, Michael felt a quiet, steadfast resolve settle in his chest. Downstairs, Reed Financial's lobby filled with clients, some familiar, others new, drawn by the integrity of a man whose name now carried principle. A woman in a tailored blue dress approached the desk to open an account. When offered forms, she paused and said softly, "It's not just the service. I'm here for what your company represents." By late afternoon, Lancaster Bancorp's board held a final, desperate meeting. Legal counsel presented grim options: restructuring, government intervention, class action liabilities. The words tolled like a funeral bell. Stanton sat still, hands trembling, the weight of failure crushing him. A tablet notification blinked. Lancaster Bancorp stock trading, halted pending investigation. Michael, in his office, closed his laptop with a soft click. He looked at Clara and Evan, his expression calm, resolute. "It's done," he said quietly. They understood it wasn't just an end. It was a beginning, a new chapter for Reed Financial and for every person and institution that believed power could silence, exclude, or diminish. Outside, the city pulsed on. Headlines would shift, markets would stabilize, but the story would endure, woven into an industry forced to face its reflection. As final emails were sent, funds secured, and Lancaster's calls went unanswered, Michael Reed stood, not as a man fueled by revenge, but as a quiet force whose dignity, patience, and commitment to justice had rewritten the rules. In the weeks after Lancaster Bancorp's dramatic fall, New York's skyline shone as brightly as ever. For Michael Reed, though, the light no longer held the cold gleam of false promises or hidden cruelties. It glowed with the quiet promise of change. From his office at Reed Financial, he watched Lancaster's influence fade from market tickers and headlines. His focus wasn't on revenge or fleeting victory. His thoughts turned to the work ahead, the steady, quiet task of building something lasting in the void left by Lancaster's collapse. He knew headlines would fade, public memory would waver, outrage would cool unless replaced by action. As his team finalized transfers and compliance reports, Michael outlined a new initiative, not to profit from Lancaster's ruin, but to sow seeds for a more inclusive financial future. He envisioned partnerships with community banks in underserved areas, mentorship for young entrepreneurs of color, and workshops to demystify financial systems often used as barriers, not tools. At Reed Financial, meetings took on a new energy. Clara Mendes and Evan Singh crafted outreach strategies, ensuring programs were thoughtful, enduring frameworks. They connected with leaders in neighborhoods like Southside and Westwood, inviting them to lead, not just participate. Michael demanded transparency, partnerships amplifying silenced voices, policies shaped by real experiences, not abstract theories. In a moving moment, Michael met young Black entrepreneurs in a renovated community center turned co-working space. He listened as they shared frustrations, closed doors, missed opportunities, systemic barriers no excellence could overcome. He offered no grand promises. He took notes, asked questions, and said, "We're here to change that, not by offering you our table, but by building a new one together." It wasn't a dramatic gesture, but it resonated. Reed Financial's approach spread through business circles, not as scandal, but as a model of leadership rooted in integrity and community. Michael's name became tied not just to Lancaster's fall, but to a vision for what could replace it. Initiatives grew: financial literacy in schools, small business incubators, partnerships with credit unions for fair capital access. Lancaster Bancorp's remnants were absorbed by competitors, its name erased from towers and documents. Michael didn't gloat. The true victory lay not in a corrupt system's fall, but in proving a better one could rise. He often recalled the morning he was escorted from the bank's foyer, the weight of humiliation, the sting of exclusion etched in his memory. He also recalled the moment the financial world realized the dismissed man was their equal. No, their better, not for wealth or power, but for principle and vision. In quiet moments, Michael wondered what Lancaster's executives thought as they saw Reed Financial's initiatives rise. Did they regret their choices? Did they see, too late, what they'd dismissed? It didn't matter. As spring warmed the city, Reed Financial hosted its first community summit in a renovated Southside library, not a corporate boardroom. Community leaders, educators, entrepreneurs, and students filled the space, their voices sparking ideas. Michael stood at the back, listening, not as a leader, but as part of a movement bigger than himself. He knew dismantling barriers was ongoing work. Real power lay in the steady labor of building better together. He smiled as a young woman, perhaps his niece's age, shared plans for a financial literacy podcast for teens. He watched Clara and Evan collaborate with activists on accessible loan programs, feeling a lightness in his chest. Not relief, but hope. For Michael, the greatest triumph wasn't tearing down walls. It was building bridges strong enough for all. His journey transcended personal victory, striking at systemic injustice's core. From his quiet entry into Lancaster Bancorp, a reserved man in a simple suit, he carried not just wealth, but unwavering resolve. What followed was a story of shame met with resilience, silent strength against blatant disrespect, and a reclaiming of dignity, not through confrontation, but through truth's relentless force. His expulsion from the bank wasn't just one act of bias. It reflected deeper societal assumptions that worth can be judged by appearance or preconceived power. When Michael's true role, as a key stakeholder propping up billions in Lancaster's assets, was revealed, the collapse was swift and undeniable. Yet his true victory wasn't Lancaster's fall. It was his refusal to be defined by the prejudice that sought to diminish him. Instead of seeking revenge, he built an inclusive, community-focused financial ecosystem, prioritizing transparency, equity, and opportunity. His story reminds us that change doesn't come from exposing injustice alone. It starts with what we do after the truth is revealed. Michael didn't just expose a flaw, he showed a solution. He proved leadership isn't about dominating a broken system, but using resources to create paths for others. His commitment to uplifting as he rose turned a potential story of bitterness into profound inspiration. We may not all have Michael's resources, but we can challenge injustice where we see it. It begins with refusing silence, listening to the marginalized, and using our influence, no matter how small, to foster fairness and respect. In workplaces, communities, or personal lives, we can choose to build bridges, not guard walls. Reflecting on Michael Reed's journey, let it spark our own. Ask, what barriers will I challenge? Whose voices will I amplify? How can I help make respect a right, not a privilege? If this story moved you, sparked thought, or stirred your sense of justice, subscribe to our channel. Your support drives our mission to share stories that uplift, challenge, and inspire. Stay tuned for narratives shining a light on courage, resilience, and the quiet power of doing right. Join us on this storytelling journey that informs and transforms. Subscribe now and help us keep making a difference.